welcome to Chart of the Day Cafe for Tuesday, November 1st, 2016. Just going to read our disclaimer quickly. Trading stocks has a high level of risk and viewers should complete their own due diligence on any stock or underlying that they intend to own. 100% of the content of this video and communique is intended for journalistic and educational purposes only. This video and all indicators, strategies, and articles herein should not be construed as investment advice. As always, thank you for your patience with that and with your patience for my continuing scratchy voice as I get over this cold. So as regular viewers well know, we always start our videos off with a look at the Russell Index, and for that we use the IWM, which is the ETF that represents the Russell 2000, and we step back to take a look at it on a 5-year monthly time frame. We were paying particular attention to this blue channel that the Russell traded within through all of 2014, had this little lift up and out in early 15, hit this upper blue band, sold off, and then price strength came back in, bringing us right back up to that upper blue band. But now that we have the month of October complete, we can take a look at some of the monthly candles. And as we were saying, this blue band area up here may offer some resistance, and sure enough, it did in the month of October. So we have a red bearish looking candle. But having said that, it's landed right at this more minor area of support here, this orange band here. We also, if you've been watching regularly, have this trend line drawn in here on the smaller time frame to reflect a wedge that the Russell is trading in. So I'm going to move it away from the 5-year monthly to the 2-year weekly so we can better see that wedge. So that's the same upper blue band. Here's our black line. And we've been saying to make a run at this upper blue level, the Russell's going to have to get through our trend line here. Yesterday was a doji day, meaning a little bit of indecision and a stop in the selling. So this is the candle from last week. This is the candle so far for this week. Will it reverse here? It's kind of in that, roughly in that area of support. I'm going to move it away from the 2-year weekly to the 9-month daily so we can better see. Let's pull it into a smaller time frame. I'm sorry, it's hard to see on the 9-month, but you can see this may be a reversal setup happening here. I'm filming this at about 8:30 on Tuesday morning. The futures are slightly higher. There was some positive economic data that came out of China that seems to be buoying the markets. Bank of Japan decided to hold steady and not offer any more stimulus, so that's in the news as well this morning. And the Fed is starting its 2-day session today and tomorrow. So those are things to be aware of for sure. So that's the smaller time frame look on the Russell, with price below the 8-day EMA on the Russell, meaning the market is not showing strength at the moment. We will not be putting any fresh charts forward, but some past Chart of the Day Cafe picks that look interesting here, and we've been talking about. Checked the scores this morning. Sturm Ruger still looking good. We talked about this last week, hitting the trend line, and sure enough, it popped up from that trend line. Just as a reminder, we put this one forward way back here. The 5-year chart, weekly, we put it forward here. We reiterated it here in this green circle. So this one's done pretty well. Check the scores this morning, they were good. The other one, past Chart of the Day Cafe pick that looks interesting here too, is IN. All of these that I'm mentioning this morning pay dividends too. So should the markets rise from here, and that's a big should, if, then these ones might be worth taking a look at. And you can go back to the videos as a reference. The other one, ACN. We mentioned it here. It was a recent Chart of the Day Cafe pick, so it's softened since we put it out, but it's still holding that trend line. And if the markets can, look to reverse here, this one might be interesting as well. Also, check the scores, pays a dividend, and then the final one is UPS. We put it out here at this green circle. It's been kind of dancing around a little bit, but it's holding true to our trend line. Should the markets lift here, this one might be worth a look as well. So with that, I'm going to go back now and take a look at some of the big charts for the month that I think are worth paying attention to. So if you want to move on, that's great. But for those of you that want to stick around, here we go with a look at some of the big charts. So let's go back to the Russell monthly. not CPS, sorry, IWM. So there are a couple of sectors that we've been paying particular attention to that we've been saying if this market wants to truly make a run at this upper blue band and go higher, they might need to kick in. The transports and the banking sector. So I'm going to take away my drawings just because it makes things easier to see. I'm going to hide the drawings. And so we're looking at the Russell. We had a red candle for the month of October on the Russell, showing some weakness coming in. IYT, or sorry, the transports, and I'm going to use the index itself for that as opposed to the ETF, and that is $TRAN. So the Russell had a red candle for the month of October. The transports had a doji. So indecision coming into the transport. So that's why I think this is one to really keep an eye on. And we'll look at the smaller chart in a minute as to why I think that's important. But you can see this area here on the transports is pretty interesting. So we had a doji for the month of October. So we had a red candle on the Russell, doji on the transports, but the banking sector had a strong candle. Let's go. And for that we used $BKX. So here's the candle for the month of October in the banking sector. Strong candle. So we have sectors and indices that are not really confirming one another. Banking strong, transports doji, which is indecision, and Russell soft. So in situations like this, I sort of say, okay, so which one are we going to look to for guidance? And so now I'm going to pull it into this smaller time frame so we can better see. Let's go weekly. Here's the Russell so far. Will it hold this area of support? Kind of needs to here. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. Again, we're looking at it on the 9-month weekly. And the banking sector had this topping candle last week. May not be a topping candle. If we get follow through, it may continue to just go higher, but you want to be aware that we had a longer wick and a softening in sentiment in the banking sector through the back half of last week. The transports look pretty good. Of them all, I would say this one looks the most solid to me. So now I'm going to put my lines back in, and so we can see that the transports, we've been keeping an eye on this big wedge. So this is a great big wedge, this black line, going back a lot of years. Big time frame wedge. These are the weekly candles getting squeezed into the wedge, into the trend line of the wedge. It had this breakout, and now it's in kind of this more minor wedge pattern. But I like the wick from last week and the defense of my black trend line. So that's why I think the transports are really interesting here, and the one that I'm keeping an eye on very closely. So even though the Russell showed softness, the transports kind of held steady. So it'll be interesting to see how these behave in the week, days, and week ahead. So I'll be looking to the transports. And here's how the banking sector looks. So we had this wedge pattern drawn in here when it was in the apex, saying the banking sector is at this orange line, very important line on the longer term charts. Will it break out and go higher? And it did. But it had this is a topping candle here. Will it continue to go lower? We'll see. But that's one to keep an eye on as well. It's okay if it goes a little lower as long as it makes a higher high than here. We want to see that. We want to see it hold this orange trend line. And the Russell itself has that, a little bit of support came in yesterday. We'll see if it gets follow through today. So those are the important charts on the big time frame. The other one that I wanted to flag for you that I think is worth keeping an eye on, I keep an eye on the junk bond market as a reflection of the credit markets overall. So here is the candle for the month of October on JNK, which is the ETF for the Barclays high yield junk bond index. So we're looking at it on a 5-year monthly time frame. There's my orange line where it hit resistance in the past. It hit that and reversed in the month of October. So I would be keeping an eye on that as well. Having said that, the volume's really good, especially if we step back to take a look at it on a bigger time frame, like quarterly. So there we are. Here's my wedge. It's exceeded my trend line and hit the orange line, but I'm keeping an eye on that one as an overall proxy kind of thing for how things are looking in the broader credit markets. Hope that makes sense. And that's just my thinking. Might not be important to other people, but I just like to keep an eye on that. And my most important chart right here, right now, for me at least, is the US dollar. I'm going to take away all my lines because they're a bit confusing. Or actually, I'll move it into a smaller time frame so we can just see this pink line here for me is an important line going back a pretty long way. This was a channel it was trading in. It broke out of that channel. We're looking at UUP, by the way, sorry, which is the ETF that represents the US dollar. And we're taking a look at it on a 2-year weekly time frame. With the Fed meeting in the next couple of days, this might be an interesting one to keep an eye on. This might be a reversal candle from last week, right at our trend line, or my trend line, I should say. So it may come in, but on a smaller time frame, I hope I'm not getting too complicated here. It's trading in this little wedge pattern. So I just think the US dollar is going to be the one chart that it implicates so many other things, emerging markets, credit markets, everything. So I want to see how the US dollar behaves here. And if it continues to show strength, that'll be interesting. I hope that makes sense and it's not too confusing. So with that, I will leave you, and we'll put another video out on Thursday. Maybe we'll get some price strength coming into the Russell and we can put out some fresh charts. Thanks and have a great next couple of days.